Moderating today's panel is Mike Stone from Reuters. He's going to be joined by Justin Fanelli, the CTO of the Navy, Steve Escaravage, EVP at Booz Allen Hamilton, and Dr. Jennifer McArdle, who is growth at Helsing AI. So with that, please, Mike, take it away.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for kicking it off on the last panel of the day. And as we know, cocktail hour is coming up, so this is your software is eating the world, including the Department of Defense panel, just as a little amuse-bouche. So the Defense Innovation Board's software acquisition and practices study emphasized the ability to acquire and deploy software is central to national defense. And the department's ability to adapt and respond is determined by its ability to develop and deploy software in the field. That's why we're here today. The department has realized this and is moving out with a flurry of new directives, memos. So to set the table before we go on, it's been a few weeks since the software acquisition pathway and the Army's transformation initiative memos have been put out. There's a rumor that Air Force is going to come out with one. Somebody from the Navy might preview something, so we might make news today, who knows. So what are the differences as you all have seen them and absorbed them over the past few weeks between these various memos and initiatives, such as the Software Acquisition Pathway Memo, the Army Transformation Initiative, ATI, the Air Force's upcoming memo, which I don't think anyone's seen quite yet, so I might have just given a tip to Colin, sorry. So we can go into that, that'd be great.
I can start. Hey, family. In general, we have a lot to kind of unpack and in some cases unlearn. And so it is going to take more than one document. The question I get most often is like, do these align? Yes, they align. There have been a lot of folks, not everyone, but a lot of folks who have been playing not to lose, and that's a bad strategy for winning. And so this is, we kind of see this as a very aligned reset if you'd like to play to win. Like, this is your heyday, this is your renaissance if you do want to deliver much, much more. And so how do they fit? Software acquisition pathways was there, but now it's been emphasized to say, hey, you can do a lot more acquisitions this way. Actually, it's not even optional anymore. Show us why you can't do this. And so before, this was, let's say, 5% of the organization who was leaning forward and potentially getting knocked back into their place unless they were real mavericks. Now the encouragement is for everyone to be a maverick, right? And so like we probably got up to, in some of the best organizations, 10 or 15% of the organization acting like tigers. And everyone else, the cage is gone, and we're waiting to see what happens with the other 85%. Will they pretend like the cage is still there? Will they hide, or will they come out? And so the Army has done, and we work with the Army every day, the Army's done something pretty awesome to say, hey, let's be aggressive, let's open the doors, let's do this unleashing. The Secretary of Defense did that with that first one. So I think there's really strong alignment there. On the Navy side, we're working individual groups. We know where the action is, and we are working from a private-public perspective, and so that's specifically in that order, private-public, to say, hey, what are the 10 success stories that have shown how we've already done this, and how do we further unleash those people and train the rest of the workforce for not just you have permission to play to win, but here's what this looks like, and make sure that we're facilitating that. So I think more to come on that really, really soon.
Yeah, I would say just two other quick things. The software pathway now becomes sort of the acquisition structure. And so that will affect the program offices and the PEOs who now have to implement that. But then also in the same memo, requiring the push towards commercial solution openings and OTs. That will drive really the impact on industry. I thought it was interesting too how in the memo itself it clarified it is for the component of software in weapon systems. So you're going to see more decoupling where you'll have hardware and software components like the middle tier of acquisition supports. And I'll just leave it there for now.
All right. Well, I guess I will pick up on the hardware piece of this. So the software acquisition pathway is just one pathway within the adaptive acquisition framework. And I think when we think about the software acquisition pathway, we think, great, we're going to be able to get software onto our legacy platforms, or we're going to better integrate software and hardware by decoupling it. We're going to have the best software with the best hardware. And I want to sit here and say, no, I don't actually think that's entirely true. I think this is a great step in the right direction, but more actually has to happen. So part of the software acquisition pathway looks at embedded software. So we talk a lot about software-defined warfare. So how do we take our legacy systems, bring software onto it, give it that differentiated capability, or integrate it into this complex system of systems concept or a kill web? That's great, that makes sense. The problem is it's not that easy. Even if you're able to use the software acquisition pathway, if you're using software to change the hardware baseline, or change some of the interfaces associated with that hardware, or change certain key performance parameters around that hardware, you are still gonna need engineering change requirements. ECRs, or is it ECPs? Engineering change proposals. And so those ECPs can be an incredibly time-consuming process. And so we also have to start thinking through, how do we change those ECPs in a meaningful way to actually expedite the process writ large? And Steve was joking before I got on the stage that every time I open my mouth, I talk about modeling and simulation as a modeling and simulation person. So I can't help it, I am gonna do it even though I said I wouldn't do it. But I think we need to start thinking about, how do we use these digital tools that make software so powerful, you know, that digital data model triad, to also be able to expedite the ECP process too, to really get at that software-defined hardware future.
Justin, can you respond to Jennifer's pain point about the ECPs and how that's going to be a hitch for moving out with software-defined hardware and change orders?
So that's part of a waterfall process, right? And so if you think about like, how many steps do I have to take to get to Constitution Ave, or how, like, if you're thinking about only 1 or 2 steps at a time, that's what it ends up looking like. If you're making more holistic in a hyper-specialized world, you're making more holistic, let's pan out and compare updating a legacy platform versus divesting a legacy platform and looking at what the replacement would look like and the total cost of ownership. That is the comparison we want. And so the answer here is, if we have the idea of, well, what we use is lean business case to say, oh, we should divest this early. Or here are 2 systems that we can replace with 1 larger modern service delivery offering. And so I guess the short of this is, if you ECP it up and then look at the total cost of ownership versus saying, hey, this Lego block does part of the kill web differently or better, and you can explain that to us and we understand the trade-offs in a non-technical way, in an outcome-oriented way, we can now make better decisions. Before it was, this is in this program office and this is in this program office, and the translation's really expensive and you never get there, so you have to have the same Department of Transportation people like unpaving a road and then paving it over it, and like, we're allowed to do that very differently, and we're giving permission to the private sector to say, even if it works horizontally, even if it works over or across different groups, here's what that would look like, and then here are the either improvements or divestments along the way.
So with these new memos and this new guidance that come down, this opening up of pathways that they would like to affect, what are some of the potential opportunities, growth areas for things like software-defined hardware, or new innovations that you see as a ripe attack surface that anyone in this room could take advantage of?
Yeah. So I can give you a few, but like I want to, I'll do it. But like I want to like put something out there first. Most of the people here either have served in the military or are very close to the problem, right? Like you've seen the problem, you've experienced the problem, you've experienced the pain with that. That is the most important insight. So what should you work on? The thing that sucks the most. Whatever is causing warfighters pain And if you can codify how to define that differently and how to show that is a higher value or higher impact problem. Now, I'll tell you how we decide. Instead of just saying, hey, we're going to do an RFP, we will still do RFPs, but instead of just saying, here is a prescriptive request for proposal on this particular problem, we're open soliciting for, hey, here's an improvement. That, number one, is like slightly different. DARPA did BAAs, but like there aren't a lot of organizations that do that. It also allows us to compare impact, so like sort by impact, so it's not linear. And so if you say, hey, I can make a bigger difference on the infrastructure side or edge compute, right? So like edge compute, we talk about edge compute a lot. It's not very big right now. So that's a $16 billion CAGR compared to clouds. CAGR is as big as the DoD's budget. If we can grow that, not in 30 different program offices, but in a few places where we're coordinated and interacts, same as autonomy. Can we have enterprise services there? This looks completely different. So I'd say like the teaming piece where you can show a non-linear impact is the area. And so like all that to say, Mike Frank, my deputy, is here for each of the emerging tech areas and for each of our PEOs essentially and our mission functions. We have, here are the things that we think we're doing pretty well. We think you can make those better. And then here are the things that are just outright gaps. And so outright gaps sounds attractive. It also means we don't have experience buying it. So it's just a different sales process if it's Horizon 3 versus Horizon 2. But if you can show that we're woefully behind, so look at GSA reports, look at these readiness problems, and you can define it in a way where it's already budgeted for, but we do that very differently, we're going to have a hard time saying no, and you should make it a hard time saying no.
Steve?
Yeah, and on top of that, if it's under this new CSO to OT process, you can actually engage in the collaborative statement of work. Like, you can engage and talk about the problem, talk about the solution, talk about the boundaries. Under the current system, you're really restricted from doing that because there's a lot of fear on the side of the acquisition professionals of, if I'm not allowed to ask you these questions, if I don't put it out there to everybody. And it just, to me, it's always seemed unusual. These are big problems, serious consequences if we don't get them right. And to not be able to have that dialogue has always been a limitation. Under the OT process, you can do that. It allows you to be more creative because you're not just responding to a set of fixed requirements, but you can say, hey, as part of that collaborative exchange, here's what we're thinking. How does this align with your other investments and capabilities? It's hard to do under the current system.
This is interesting. So I'm going to maybe get myself in trouble here, but like I want to try an analogy. So before it was waterfall, right? And so like there are still some things you need to be waterfall on. We were talking about the other day, like the Columbia class submarine was designed in finished design around 2016. It'll be end of service life in 2081, right? That's deliberate, it's waterfall, it's the best in the world, this makes sense. There are exquisite systems and there's a need for that. For everything that can be commercial or dual use, where we can make use of other people's money, it's allowed to be more interactive, right? And so like the analogy that comes to mind, and I mean this super respectfully, is like from an Old Testament perspective, like you just like kind of read the 10 Commandments and then like went home and thought about them. And then in the New Testament, like it's more interactive, right? Like you are interacting with Jesus. Like these are the difference between like you're allowed to be agile. We went from like using waterfall and talking about agile to actually permission to be agile and like unleashed to be agile. Like who's going to come out of that? I think that's an open invitation for anyone to actually be proactive as opposed to reactive. I'll just rant a little bit longer. We still get emails, and I think these are useful emails that say, hey, did you know you requested something that we don't make anymore? Like it's end of life. It's been end of life for a while. Like it doesn't need to be like that.
Well, so I would like to quantify this from the Navy's perspective, from y'all's perspective in business. How many interactions have you had that reflect this Old Testament, New Testament interaction with the government since the memo came out? And how many do you anticipate having by end of year, for example?
Well, I think it depends on what opportunity you're going after. I mean, in industry, there are still a lot of program of records that are coming under FAR 15. And I mean, I agree with everything that Steve and Justin were saying. I mean, from an industry standpoint, oftentimes when you're going after those opportunities, you kind of feel like you're in this sequestered black box where you're spending a ton of R&D and a ton of B&P and you're cut off from the customer. And then all of a sudden their head pops up and you've got a bunch of ENs dropped on you. And you're still in this sequestered black box, but you want to give the government, what they want and what they need. Whereas conversely, when you go through, the OTA process or the CSO process, and DIU is great at this, you really genuinely feel like you're part of a partnership. The process is transparent. You know exactly what's coming down the pipeline. You sit down with the government. You end up having this really rich technical discussion where you're better able to understand their mission requirements and needs. I think the government, you end up in this really awesome kind of competitive bake-off where the best technology wins. And I think the government gets a better idea of the differentiated technologies that are being put in front of them. So I think for both parties, it's this great, great experience. But I do want to caveat, because I feel like it's really easy when you're making these like FAR-based OTA, CSO kind of comparisons, it's really easy to sit up here and seem like you are, absolutely bashing the FAR. I do want to put a pin in the fact that I do think there's a lot of goodness in the FAR. And there's a lot of language that's in the FAR for a reason. It's because bad actors have done certain things that have required us to have that language in the FAR. And there's a lot of protections in the FAR for government and industry around, say, things like IP or data rights. And so what you really want is to be able to take advantage of things like OTAs and CSOs, but to have contracting officers that are, really read into things like the FAR, where they're able to take that language and bring it in a really thoughtful way into OTAs and CSOs. So you get that wonderful process, you get that wonderful partnership, but you also get, the goodness that does exist from the FAR.
Let me follow up on that partnership issue. Where have you seen compromise as you go into that iterative process? Where have you had to either seed profit, seed ideas, seed intellectual property, and where have you seen opportunity?
So at least with me personally, it's been these kind of cost versus capability trade-offs where the government is saying, hey, we have these performance specifications that we want to, optimize against. And you're able to say, yes, we can meet these for performance specifications, but it's going to be at this cost. Or we could do these various things and it would be at this other costs that might actually be better for the government. So what is it that'll allow you to actually accomplish your mission at the right price point? And that's kind of where I've seen, those kind of rich conversations.
So Steve, what about you and your interaction and number of interactions past since the memo came out and then at the end of the year? Same for you, Justin.
So I would say over the last, few weeks and months, because we're still in these windows, right? There was an original window from the March 6th, the 30-day window, and then in the broader EO, there's a 120-day window, if I remember correctly, where there's reporting requirements back to OMB. So we're still in that window. We're still, and yet we're starting to see some agencies, some organizations lean in and say, this is going to be the new reality, so let's get started. I would say that it's still a fraction of the overall, requirements that are being let, and I believe that's because people are looking for guidance. They want to understand, how do I structure an outcome-based contract using a CSO as the solicitation approach, using an OT as the acquisition approach. The reality is, especially for the more complicated programs, there isn't a huge evidence base. There is an evidence base from DIU, but there's not a huge evidence base that all of the contracting and acquisition offices are familiar with.
And for the rest of the year, as you look out, hockey stick growth or middling?
So once you get into, I believe would be August 6th roughly then, right? If that's that 120-day window, you would assume that after that point is when you're in the by exception with reporting to the senior acquisition official of the agency, who then also reports back to OMB if it's by the implementation.
The cool part of that is we're in the game. like we actually get to affect this. Like we wouldn't be allowed to bet on it, even though they let Pete Rose in now, right? So like we have a effect on like the slope of that line, right? It can be a hockey stick. So I'd say, like, to answer the question directly, it's probably double in terms of inbound. But like the engagements aren't meetings. We like that is like a limited time factor. You can only have so many meetings a day. Ask again, Mike or these guys. But inbound can be quantitative, and I think it's really important right now to be extra quantitative. And so Nolan from AWS was talking about outcomes. Like we have outcome-driven metrics, and so now we can meet with 50 companies a week, but we don't have to have a 30-minute session where we're like doing task switching and to say, oh, this is a edge server and this is the software on the edge server. We can say, how much does that impact our operational resilience? They think they're awesome. It moves us 1%, can't do it, right? The more that it's time to scale. And so the more that we have a story that can go across multiple stakeholders, and you don't want even our best communicators coming back and explaining this to everybody differently every time. There are too many stakeholders. We just need good outcome-driven metrics, WAMs in our case, that can carry that through. 2x, pretty good for a short period. That means that people are responding to their unleashing. That can easily be 10x if we all lean in. And the cool part here is like with the nonlinearity, like the results are nonlinear too. Like letter grades, I like Fatara, but like letter grades like A to F, that's linear. Drones aren't linear. Like the sloped line between cost and performance, like that's not necessarily linear. There are knees in those curves, right? And so if you can show that here is the value and here's what the 70% looks like and here's what the 80% looks like, we can have a much more nuanced conversation that doesn't involve PowerPoints necessarily on here is the impact that we can have. That allows us to say, literally, here is your program of record, here is one thing or a half a thing or three things that can do this a lot cheaper for and more effective and attritable if we want to. Like those trade-offs should be as quick as possible.
And for the end of the year, through the end of the year, it's going to be double your interactions?
I don't know that we have time to double our yeah. So if it's quantitative and online, then I think we'd like 10x, right? And so like I guess to address Steve's question, how many people go forward? How many people tonight call a PM or someone that they served with and say, hey, are you guys leaning forward or does this not apply to you? And so we'll do training with all of the PMs and PEOs, hopefully, to say, not just here is guidance, but like here's what this looks like, here's how you can win bigger. I mean, if we're going, protecting this country means we win a lot more and a lot bigger, right? Like we're allowed to do that. There were times where people were talking about, hey, let's, like we don't want to, like pick winners. Like, okay, but you are allowed to go bigger investment-wise into things that are working. What's the opposite of that, right? We want more of that. We just want to show where outcomes overmatch is clear so that we can defend those decisions.
I guess that's why we call it the offset symposium. So, Justin, for you, how do you measure success? Are there better metrics for success that the DoD should be using writ large?
We like our WAMs, so world-class alignment metrics. So we did an ACDC, Accelerating Change Design Concept, to say, hey, KPIs, KPPs are good, industrial age, 120 years old. If you know how wide these panels are going to be, then like you can spec that. In a place where maybe there are 5 different types or classes of solution, then we don't want to overly prescribe the how, we just want to measure the outcome. So who is responsible for an outcome? I've heard 12 people are responsible, or everyone's accountably equal. We are responsible for what each of us do and what each of our teams do, and we should be able to quantify that. And so what we did was we said, KPIs are good if you know exactly what you want. If we're out buying commercial, then we want metrics that can keep up with the pace of change. And so if you spec that and you put that in a document and then the pace of the technology changes, like you don't want us to update that document. And so how do we capture the best yield out of moving targets? And so we have 5 of those. We have operational resilience, we have cost per user, we have user experience, we have user time lost, and then this always happens, there's always one. I do them in different order every time. So the, I'll get the 5th one, but the idea of being able to translate whatever you're doing into impact is the deal, right? That you should be able to take anything. If you say, hey, we make you better, but we don't do any of those, like I'm unconvinced. And so look up the Innovation Adoption Kit. It's very clear on those 5. And if you can't show what difference you're making, we want to know we're making a difference. You want to know you're making a difference. Feedback in the government has never been what it should be, and we can make that right.
So I'd like to go down the line, starting with you, Jennifer. This is an opportunity to compliment someone and how well they've, a peer, a competitor, and how well they've provided a successful software acquisition product into the DoD, something that you think deserves a shout out. And then I'd like to hear from Justin about things that he hated.
Oh, well, considering I'm sitting on stage at Second Front's Offset Symposium, I will take this opportunity to shout out Second Front and my lovely friends at Second Front in the audience. I think they've done such a great service to small businesses, providing Game Warden and helping to streamline the ATO process. That's critical, and it's something that can be super, super challenging to navigate. I mean, the DoD is just such a, like the DoD acquisition process writ large is incredibly Byzantine, let alone trying to navigate, you know, getting your software onto government systems as well. So, you know, I think they deserve a lot of love for that. So well done with Game Warden.
Yeah. I feel like I should also say Second Front, but I'm gonna, yes, of course.
I stole it. I got there first. Thanks for asking me first.
I'll give a Navy example. Completely no reason for that. But there's a company that we met years ago that they did one thing really well. They found a way to take very large, slow models, machine learning models, and they found a way to compress them. This company called Latent AI. And very early days in both the Navy, through their ammo project, in the Army, this was a tiny company, they found a way to connect with the right processes, working with DIU, working with the Navy, to integrate that capability. And they did it, it worked the right way. They solved a problem, a component of a problem, the software component of a problem that could be used in both business and mission systems, and they found a way to get it into experimentation, operational use. That'd be my example.
Justin, you can choose, you know, angel or devil, up to you, since you're bringing the biblical references.
I'm allowed to be nice?
I'd like both.
Okay. He's needy, huh? So I'd say like the, so Leighton was on an app fit with Domino Data Labs and Firestorm with their, Excels, recently won those. This is, I really like AppFit. And so if you can get over the valley of death and bring your own money to show how you're disrupting things, then we can get you into a program office or a PEO faster. And so like, that's great. Like they literally like came with their own check. And so like that placement piece is good. I think this is a good thing, but like a lot of the things that annoy me, like some of those have been dozed recently. And so we're doing Operation Cattle Drive. And if you can't quantify your outcomes, like is not a good time for that. And so I'd say that there are both GOTS applications, like homegrown, and then some contracts that just are not able to specify the impact that they're making. Or if you are in an area that is on a significant, like on an exponential trajectory, and you're just making incremental progress, and your UFERs or your requests for more money are going up, and you're not able to quantify that, those are the ones where It's just struggle bus. And then lastly, like shadow IT. Like I think actually, like if you're in Horizon 2, if you're experimenting with shadow IT, if we are one of like maybe the bottom 50 AI projects, like that's okay to learn, but if you can't scale, then like put your hand up and say, we can't scale. So from a data environment perspective, we started consolidating data environments to Advantage Jupyter, and like that allowed us to say, hey, we are singling up. We don't want people to be good at, so software factories. We have lots of software, we don't need lots of software factories so that we can make in-house. We need a few of them that work, and those should be exponentially better than the ones that we get rid of.
I've got a good Doge question that came in from the audience. If Doge is the comet that annihilated the dinosaurs, and you touched on Doge, so I wanted to get to it. If Doge is the comet that annihilated the dinosaurs in the defense industry, what advice do you have, and this can go to everyone, for the mammals in the room who are poised to evolve into the next era? How should the next 10 years differ from the last 30 since the Last Supper event? Give some advice. Tell them what the future is going to look like.
I'll start. I think the opportunity, there's two things that need to be done really well right now. One is, we talked about being able to explain what you do in terms of outcomes. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. You know, we still are leading with the technology, explaining, you know, let me demo what my technology can do. And then there's sort of implied outcomes. And I think that there's still some work to do across industry. In many cases, the reasons that these programs continue to go on is that there's this continuity of operation component to that. So you've got to explain the risk of being able to bring your capability in and getting to the not the 1x, 2x, but the 10x improvement so that it's worth the risk and continuity of operations. That would be one piece of advice. And the other thing is, there's a lot of technical debt that exists across industry, period, both existing long-term defense industry and newcomers. I think that trying to identify who complements you, where you might be able to close some technical debt, even if it's a company that doesn't look like yours, it's probably a good idea.
So, I guess I don't necessarily like the idea of Doge taking out certain, primes in some type of dinosaur type event. I think for us to prevail in a future protracted competition, we need a lot more companies. We don't obviously need another Last Supper, and we need a more resilient defense industrial base. So that means, do some of the primes need to adapt and change? Do we need like a Darwin on the dinosaurs? Probably. But we also need more ways for more entrants to get involved, to work with those larger companies, to figure out how they're complementary, to work more quickly with the government. I don't want to see less, I want to see more, and I don't necessarily think it's productive for us to think about, taking out certain key members of the DIB just because they've been around, forever. I do think there's goodness everywhere. It's just figuring out where that goodness is.
That's really interesting. That's sort of like a civil-military fusion, except for like prime under, lower tier fusion. That's pretty interesting. Justin?
What percentage of the DoD's budget is discretionary?
All of it?
You think?
It comes from the discretionary side of the budget.
Sure.
Okay,
But like
thanks.
at the execution level, thank you, Mike. A majority of the money is spoken for. And so if you're a new entrant and you want to get in and you're not in, you probably have to compare yourself to something that we're already doing unless it's new money, right? And so comparing yourself favorably, competition makes us stronger, right? You don't necessarily have to annihilate a species, but we should all be competing and we should all be getting more for the dollar as a result of that, right? It makes us stronger. Competition is awesome. And so I think the answer to the question is, if you are, who's seen the horizons diagram that we have? Okay, well, look it up. But we didn't invent it. It's McKinsey's, but we added Horizon 0. So the Horizon 3 is scouting. We're scouting every day, thousands of companies. Horizon 2 is piloting. So I think my answer to the question is, if you're in Horizon 2, if you're piloting something and you're not looking at a Horizon 1 target to divest, then like we probably don't have sustainable funds for you. And so whether that's pitting against other animals or just being way better or like some sort of like not zero-sum game opportunities, but like let's not kid ourselves about like where we get sustainable funding. So for every H2, there's an H1, and then there is divestments or cattle drive or Doge or otherwise.
So the answer to your question on how much is discretionary, every year about 125 million goes up for new hardware product. That's the attack surface for someone like an Anduril, for example, to try and put a new drone up is about 125 out of the whole budget. And then there's a equal amount about for services, but all that's on renewals based on.
Yeah, you want to do stage math on that? It's not a good percent, right?
No, but to your point, right? It's a small attack surface, right?
Yeah.
So speaking of that attack surface, how have you two started gaming the use of machine learning and AI to put forward better proposals, and how is the Navy using machine learning and AI in order to ingest more, and how are you trying to work in this new paradigm that's only come about the past couple of years?
So I feel like this is the new hot thing in B&P now. We're going to use LLMs, and we're going to be able to throw out proposals and drive down B&P costs. And I'm going to be honest, I've just seen garbage. Like, it's like you're taking all your proposals, you're putting onto the system, and this isn't my current company, this is my last one. And what you're getting is just not good. It's like a crappy research assistant vomited onto the page. And does that give you maybe a leg up, I guess, if you want to work through a garbage research assistant? So I'm not saying it's not useful. I'm just saying I don't think it's there yet, and I haven't seen a meaningful change in B&P costs around it in the past company I was at. Is that going to change? Probably. But I still think, what really matters is, a meaningful relationship with a customer, you actually really understanding their mission needs and you being able to speak to that. And I think what makes things like the OTA and CSO process so rich is you cannot gamify the system around technical proposal writing or a price proposal. You really need the best technical solution to win, and you've got to prove it. So like, you're not gaming that with an LLM. You're actually showing your technology or putting an effect on target downrange.
The two areas I would say we're having the most success right now is just old-fashioned information retrieval, where you have a requirement or there's some objective that you're trying to hit, understanding across your entire organization, have you attempted this before? What was the approach that was used, and what specifically was the outcome? That's one. And two, this is an advantage of kind of having a broader portfolio is around what is truly achievable around cost. What is the evidence base that you have? How long did it take? What did it cost? What were what was the performance threshold and objectives that you were able to achieve? And not just, candidly, a lot of that I see today coming in is made up. It's estimates. We have the benefit of looking back across what we're actually delivering at scale, real programs, and being able to go back and see what is the actual cost of that. How does that compare going forward?
I think that's a really interesting point. So I'll answer the acquisition question, but we now have a telemetry to see if people are delivering what they said they would. And there are cases where, hey, they projected 400% improvement. Oh, that was ambitious. And they got 700%, right? And so we could say, hey, they outkicked their coverage. That was awesome. We want more of that. And actually, I think that'll go into some sort of reliability scoring at some level. But the first piece is we did an acquisition beta test with a handful of PEOs. So 18 PEOs in Department of Navy. We had 5 that moved to portfolios. Portfolios means you treat your capabilities like cattle, not pets. You don't want to fall in love with the capability. You want to fall in love with the effects of it. And then from an acquisition AI perspective, you don't want to save time. You want to improve outcomes and the ratio of that. And so we took small teams and we said, hey, not can you spit out an RFP faster, it's will it receive better outcomes. And so we've seen positive results there. I think there's an opportunity to scale that AS&RDA team and just kind of across the board. I think there's like a logic and scaling will prevail. Adaptability was the WAM that I couldn't think of before. And so like this ties into complex objective functions. I really want to get nerdy, but I won't do that. But the idea of if we can show how much more we are adaptable, and so whether that's someone putting that into a proposal and they've done the translation themselves, or we do it on the back end and we say, okay, based on what you're seeing here, we're data checking that. But what is the objective function and how much better can that be? Oh man, generative AI puts out words. If we can have numbers and then just really, really crush, like that's what winning looks like to me.
It's amazing. Thanks all so very much. It's been a great afternoon, and thanks so much to Second Front, and thanks to the panel.